The moon hung like a polished coin over the cedar roofs of Moonvale Hall, and the scent of roasted venison, candle wax, and wolf musk braided together until the air itself felt heavy. I kept to the edges, a quiet omega in borrowed linen, clutching a tray that wasn't mine and a name that never fit quite right. The mating rite always sorted people like grain, alphas to the dais, betas to the front, warriors in the middle, and the rest of us scattered like chaff. Me? Half wolf, half human, never invited, always useful. Don't be seen, Eloin had told me while I laced her silver gown. But stay close. Close meant invisible. Close meant the wall. Close meant pretending the drumbeat didn't tug at my thinner wolf, the one that woke late and spoke softly. I moved when the rhythm said move, weaving through carved pillars toward the water stand, then stilled. The northern banners unfurled over the entry like a storm-ripping cloth. Silence slid across the hall. The Alpha King of the Frost March crossed the threshold with his escort, taller than the tales, broad as an oaken door, winter threaded through his dark hair. Eyes pale as first ice, reading the room the way a hunter reads snow. He should have passed me. Instead, he stopped, nostrils flaring as if the night itself had shifted. My grip tightened on the pitcher. He turned, not to the dais, not to the elders, toward the narrow slice of shadow where I'd wedged myself. For one heartbeat, my mother's pendant cooled against my skin like a warning. For the second, my human half prayed. For the third, my wolf lifted her head. There, he said to no one, voice low and cold. Moonstrange. The word brushed my spine like frost. Before I could retreat, he stepped aside and claimed the bench beside the wall, the very one I hid against, leaving a space too deliberate to ignore. The king sat. And then he looked at me like I was the only sound in a silent hall. Pour, he said, holding out a goblet carved with tiny wolves racing a crescent. Command draped over the word like a cloak. Even my thin wolf shivered and obeyed. Water trembled, kissed the rim, didn't spill. Name, he murmured, eyes forward as the elder's chant picked up its measured climb. Clara, I whispered, and wished I'd lied. His mouth shaped at once, a test. Clara. Not pack-born, not pure. Yet not human enough to fool the moon. I went very still. I had soaked my hair in smoke, my skin in sage and cedar, ground violet leaves into oil to quiet the wild note in my blood. He smelled past all of it in a breath. I serve Eloin of the southern pines, I said, careful and even. I don't belong on the dais. No, he agreed softly. You belong exactly where the moon can find you. Drums rolled. Dancers braided old steps across the floor. Laughter flickered, timid at first, then brighter when nothing exploded for daring to exist near the king. Across the hall, Eloin's eyes widened, then sharpened like drawn glass. Her father, Beta Halvern, leaned to our Alpha and spoke without moving his mouth, scheming, always wore fine clothes. I kept my gaze on the polished boards and the safe shape of the goblet. It didn't help. When did you last run? The king asked. The question landed where my secrets slept. I don't, I said too quickly. Can't. Won't, he corrected, and the word weighed more than iron. Your scent carries two roads. That's not a weakness, Clara. It's a map. The elder's staff struck stone, once, twice. The right shifted from vow to feast. The king rose in one smooth motion, and so did I, like a thread pulled by the same needle. Attend me, he said, quiet enough that only a wolf could hear. Somewhere across the hall, Eloin flinched. Somewhere inside my ribs, something long ignored lifted its head and listened. A small table appeared on a side platform, apart from the war banners and boasting laughter. From there he could see everything. From there everyone could see us. Platters arrived. Roasted roots glazed with honey, river trout bright as coins, flatbread charred and perfect. I tried not to eat and failed. Why? I asked finally, when the hum of talk rose high enough to hide small truths. Why notice me at all? Pale eyes found mine, steady and unhurried. Because the hall went quiet twice, he said. Once when I entered. Once when your scent found me. The moon dislikes lying. A flush climbed my throat. "If you mean to expose me, do it quickly," I said, forcing a smile too thin to live. "It will save everyone trouble." Something like anger flickered over his face, banked, not aimed. "I don't break what I seek to understand," he said. "And I don't parade those the Pax taught to shrink." He lifted his goblet. "To the half-road," he said, as if to himself. "To both." The toast felt like standing where two paths kissed and realizing neither was wrong. Then the doors blew inward on a gust that had nothing to do with wind. 3 torn warriors stumbled in, eyes wild. "West perimeter breached," one gasped. "Rogues organized." The last word scattered the hall like birds. Alphas rose, orders snapping like kindling. The king was already moving, a blade in human shape. He didn't shout. Wolves made space because the air decided to. "With me," he told his beta, a scarred shadow named Thorn. Then, without looking, his hand found the small bones of my wrist. Gentle. Unarguable. "And her." Thorn's look said everything about protocol and nothing about the king's decisions. We were already moving. Outside, torches streaked the night with hurried fire. I saw Eloan swept toward the safe lodges with the other high-born women. Relief pricked. Envy stung. The Alpha King didn't steer me toward safety. He steered me toward his warhorses. The stallion that answered his whistle was the color of midnight caught in rain. No tack. No fear. He pressed his brow to the king's shoulder like greeting an equal, then turned that impossible gaze on me. "He'll carry us both," the king said, voice softer for the horse than for any person I'd heard him address. "His name is Sable." Sable snorted like he disliked being introduced at all, then lowered himself enough that even I, an Omega who tripped over her own shadow, could mount. The king swung up behind me, heat and steel and winter pine, one arm caging me only so the world couldn't throw me. We moved. Forest swallowed road. Wind stitched needles into my cheeks. Wolves ran flanking, some on hooves, some on 4 paws, all quiet in that way only hunters understand. "Rogues choose ceremony because we choose softness," the king said near my ear. "But this..." We broke the trees above a narrow pass. Torch points slid below like fireflies marching in lines. "This is not rogue chaos." The shapes moved with discipline, not hunger. A scar down the night. He gestured Thorn outward and the frost march wolves melted across the ridge, vanishing into boulder and shadow. He guided Sable toward a shallow cut in the rock, just deep enough to hide a person and a horse who understood silence. "You'll wait here," he said. "If anyone comes who isn't me, you scream. And keep screaming." "What about you?" My voice sounded smaller than I liked. He touched his fingers to the silver pendant at my throat, once, respectful, as if greeting someone I loved. "I won't be long." Then the Alpha King of Winter was gone into the trees, and the night held its breath with me. Time stretched thin, then thinner. Sable's ears flicked toward sounds I couldn't name. Far off, a single howl unspooled, was answered, broke into many. When the king slid back into the cut, the edge of him was different, blood on his sleeve, smoke in his hair, calm reforged harder. "Diversion," he said. "The rail push hit the western palisade. They took 7. The word they hung in the air like frost. "Females?" I asked, throat raw. He nodded once. "Alive. Moving them into the unclaimed, dark hollow." My tray hands curled into fists. "Then we will," he said. "But we don't hunt blind." He studied me too closely, as if gauging whether a candle could bear another gust. "Clara, the elders will meet. They will snarl about territory and pride. They will count the cost twice and courage once." Pale eyes cut to the moon, then back to me. "I would have you there." I almost laughed. "At a council of alphas? I'm an Omega who trips over her own feet." "You are a bridge," he said simply. "And bridges are where armies cross and history decides its road." He offered his hand. It felt like a door. I took it. Sable surged, the forest broke, and Moonvale's lanterns reappeared like scattered constellations. Inside the ruined hall, leaders gathered tight around a scarred table. My alpha, other kings who wore no crowns, the river's matriarch with hair like steel, the mountain's young hawk-eyed chief. Conversation snagged on me as fish snag on a hidden hook. The king didn't explain me. He didn't need to. He simply stood so our shadows braided. When maps unfurled, my mouth moved before my fear did. If they're staging in Dark Hollow, they aren't rogues, I heard myself say. They're building. Silence hit like snowfall. The river matriarch's gaze sharpened. A new pack. With a stolen cradle, the mountain chief muttered. The southern pine's alpha's jaw worked. Who would dare lead it? A name with too many lives, the Winter King said, the words slow as iron. Vain. The lantern hissed. Someone swore a prayer. And the night tilted toward worse possibilities. Plans thickened like sap, scouts to the ridge, sniffers to the old logging road, warriors seated in the brush where a shout traveled faster than hoof. I should have been dismissed with the first wave of orders. Instead, the river matriarch asked, what would they smell for at the edge? And every head turned my way. Humans, I said, cheeks hot. Because humans get lost. Because a human carrying herbs is harmless until she isn't. The word she hung there, and the king went very still. No, he said automatically. Yes, I said, before I learned the wisdom of silence. You can mask me enough with wolfsbane paste to blur the edge. I can pass as an herbalist from the eastern villages. If I find proof. Vane's mismatched eyes, the captive's banding, a tattoo, you move. My alpha's gaze flicked to the king, calculating and cold. It could work. The king's stare turned glacial. You knew, he said to my alpha, soft and lethal. About her blood. We suspected. My alpha answered, palms up. We sheltered. The king laughed without humor. You benefited. The river matriarch cut across the snarl rising between kings. We are bleeding time. The girl's plan is blade thin but sharp. If she goes, she does not go alone. She won't. The king said, so fast I startled. My wolves will string themselves between her and danger like lanterns. And I will be the last lantern. He looked at me then, all frost and vow. If you run, run toward my voice. I don't run, I said, scared and steady all at once. Not anymore. He tilted his head, as if weighing a new kind of truth. At dawn, then. Orders cracked. Maps rolled. The hall emptied into movement. On the way out into the cold, I touched my mother's pendant and felt, just for a breath, like the moon noticed. Dawn rose thin and pearled, the kind of light that makes the forest hold its breath before the birds remember their songs. In the Frost March camp, wolves moved with quiet efficiency, no clatter, no wasted steps. Thorn pressed a bundle into my hands, a plain tunic the color of dry moss, trousers patched at the knees, a simple cloak, and a satchel fitted with hidden seams. Herbs, he said, voice gravel. And other things that call themselves herbs when elders are listening. He didn't look at me as he continued. If you must burn anything, burn the red wax cone. Purple smoke. We come running. I nodded, fingers finding the tiny cone tucked beside sprigs of feverfew and comfrey. The king approached then, more winter than man, and set a small knife across my palm. The handle wore a crescent pattern I already knew by touch, my mother's hammer-quiet artistry all over it. It isn't for killing so much as choosing, the Alpha King said. Cut a knot. Cut a strap. Cut yourself free. He drew the pendant from below my collar with a gentleness that made my throat ache. Let it show, he murmured. The part of you that's neither oath nor shame. I breathed once, twice, until my pulse quit trying to gallop. If they sent me, I said, the wolfsbane pace buys 1 hour. We'll be within a howl, he answered. And I'll be listening for your voice over all others. He said it like a vow. Perhaps it was. We set out separately, me on foot toward the east edge of Dark Hollow, the king and his wolves melting south and north to string a line around me so thin no I could see it, so strong it would hold if the world slipped. I rehearsed my human in the underbrush, sanding down the sharpness wolves notice, feet a little heavier, eyes a little less vigilant, breath louder than it needs to be when the ferns shiver. I palmed the paste and smeared the sting along my throat, hating the chemical burn and the way it muddied the truths of my blood. The hollow announced itself by degrees, char in the wind, iron in the water, a drift of laughter with no joy in it. Sentinels watched the tree lean the way hunger watches bread. I snapped a branch on purpose and stumbled into view clutching my satchel like a prayer. Hello? My voice came out small, cracked honey. 2 men in human form slid from the green. Not rogues at first glance. Their stance said drilled, their eyes said measured. Loss, I said quickly, before they could decide what else I might be. Herbalist. Eastern Road. I gathered past the old kiln and couldn't find my way back. They circled like patient dogs around a skittish ewe. One leaned closer and inhaled near my hairline. The wolfsbane bit his nose and he twitched, half satisfied. Herbs buy you water, the other said, already taking the satchel. And answers by you not bleeding. I'm good at both. I lied. They led me inward. The camp was too tidy for happenstance. Fires raked, shelters pitched by pattern, weapons stacked by size. At the center stood a structure made of interwoven saplings and hide, shaped like a ribcage. I tried not to see the symbolism and failed. A woman near my age, broad-shouldered, hair shorn close, fell into step at my side, eyes flat with competence. Rissa, she said without offering a hand. You walk with me now. Rank clung to her like smoke. She wasn't alpha, wasn't beta, but wore the authority of someone who survived both and chose neither. Yes, I said, mind mapping exits while my mouth made a grateful smile. Thank you. They brought me to the ribcage shelter and left me in the care of its shadow. He sat in a chair woven from antlers and stubbornness, all sharp lines and hunger. One eye blue as a winter sky. One amber like old sap thinking about fire. Vane didn't hurry when he looked at me. Predators with nothing to fear never do. A human flower picker, he said, like he collected curios and was not displeased with the new one. Convenient. He rose slow and circled once, the way a cruel thought circles a soft one. What do you call yourself? Clara, I said, letting fear crease the edges of the word. I meant people who don't have time for priests. He smiled with too many teeth showing. We have such people. Mending would be useful. His gaze snagged a bead on my pendant. I forced my hand not to fly to it. He lifted his chin a fraction, sniffed the air, frowned. The wolfsbane did its mean work. You'll tend my captives, Vane said, not bothering to lace the order with courtesy. They break too easily and breed better unbroken. If one dies, I'll decide which finger you least need. In my head I pictured the river matriarch's eyes like knife steel. In my chest I pictured the king's palms steady at my spine. Out loud I said, I need water clean enough to trick the body into believing it wants to live, and a corner to make pastes. If I save you a woman, you save me a cup. Done, he said as if we'd traded scarves at market. He snapped at Rissa. Take our healer to the nursery. My stomach lurched at the word. Rissa's jaw tightened, a flicker of distaste so quick it could have been a blink. Come, she told me. We crossed the camp to a long shelter braced with saplings. 2 guards watched outward, 2 inward. That told me everything I needed about what mattered most here. Inside, 7 women and more courage than air. Bruises and twilight colors. A bandage that smelled wrong. A stare too still to be anything but shock. I worked. I worked because that's what hands do when the heart can't decide if it should break or burn. I cleaned a cut that wanted to turn angry and sweet-talked it with salt and honey. I reset a wrist that had been yanked where wrists do not like to go. I braided the oldest pain, a mother with no pup to hold yet stolen from her pack, into a firm rope of instruction. Tonight. When the fire nearest the western tree goes low, tie your hair back, lace your shoes, do not look at anyone but me. Under the talking I let the truth thread itself between us in pieces only wolves could hear. We're coming. One woman, river-packed by the smell of shingle and sun, had eyes like flint. Who? her mouth asked without moving. I angled my shoulder to block the nearest guard and let my pendant glitter once, just once. Recognition moved across her face like a secret wind. Rissa watched me the way an archer watches a swaying target, not hostile, just measuring. When we stepped outside, she jerked her chin toward the treeline. "Herbs," she said. "Go collect. Take a piss. Breathe where the air isn't other people." I nodded and walked with a human girl gait to the edge, every hair along my nape listening. The wolfsbane's hour was decaying. I knelt, parted ferns, and let the mirror I had sewn into the satchel's lining kiss the sun. 3 short flashes toward where the frost march would be if vows could be mapped. I see you. 2 long captives alive. A slow circle, move at moonrise. I slid the mirror back, then every tree bent closer as if the forest wanted the answer with me. No sound. No sign. And yet the back of my neck cooled, the way skin does when shadow passes overhead. I closed my eyes and almost heard it, not a sound, a knowing. I'm here, little bridge. You can lie to your nose for only so long. The first gust that slid campward brought the truth of me with it, thin but real. Vane appeared at my shoulder like a rotten miracle. He caught my cloak and hauled me a step, too. "Wolfsbane is a coward's cologne," he hissed, amber-eyed bright with triumph. "What are you?" I let fear happen. Fear was believable. "A healer." He shoved that answer aside. "What are you?" "Half-road," I said before I could stop myself, and the word boomed in the narrow space between us like a drum. He smiled slow. "Abomination." The guards tightened, metal rasping leather. Rissa didn't reach for her blade, and somehow that felt louder. Vane dragged me toward the central fire pit where the heat kept courage soft. "You thought to signal," he said, sniffing. "Mirrors speak. Smoke shouts." He tipped my satchel and watched herbs fall out like green rain. He didn't see the red wax cone tucked beneath the false bottom. The world narrowed to a small calculation, angle, distance, time. I stumbled, let my knees hit earth, palms splay. My hand slid under the satchel's lip, fingertip found wax. I was on my feet with the cone in my fists before the nearest guard remembered he'd been promoted. Vane saw the motion and lunged, too late. I pitched the cone into the coals. For half a heartbeat, nothing. Then the pit breathed out a pillar of purple like the sky had been bruised from within. The camp drew breath to shout. The forest answered first. Not howls, plural, so much as one note made of many throats, a chord old as the first pact between moon and wolf. Vane snarled a word that meant kill in any language. Rissa moved like lightning broken into knives. She didn't come for me. Steel sang. Wood cracked. The treeline split and the frost march poured through like winter water through a breached dam. Wolves in 4-legged glory, warriors in leather with eyes like storm glass, and at their head the Alpha King, not yet shifted, a blade in each hand and a promise on his mouth. His gaze hit me and the world decided to keep me alive a little longer. "Westward," he called without turning his head. "Take the nursery." Wolves sluiced that way, a living river. Rissa stepped into my path, body a wall, eyes unreadable. "Move," I told her, voice low and very far from human. "Or I'll climb through you." Something flickered, a memory that wasn't mine, and she shifted just enough for me to pass. "Don't get dead, half-road," she said, like a curse disguised as advice. I ran human fast to the nursery, which is to say I ran as if I meant it and didn't think about grace. A guard swung an axe. Thorn met it with his forearm, snarled, and introduced the guard to the ground forever. I ducked inside, breath burning, and the 7 were already standing because hope teaches quicker than sermons. "Shoes," I said. "Hair up. Eyes on me. We are wolves even when we aren't." Outside, battle turned the air metallic. Inside, I cut a leather thong, freed a wrist, pressed a knife into the river woman's palm. "If anyone asks whose you are, say mine first." We moved. A spear found the doorway and learned regret. The Alpha King's blade wrote its apology in the thrower's shadow. He didn't look at me long, just enough to count 7 and find 8 where he expected none. "Good," he said, as if complimenting the sunrise. North Gap. We sprinted for the wedge of dark between two half-felled pines. Vane dropped from the ribcage shelter roof like a crow deciding it wanted to be a storm. His mismatched eyes found mine and promised ruin. The king's expression changed. No roar, no flourish, just a lethal narrowing. Take them, he told Thorn without looking away from the man who wanted to be a king and built a cage instead. Then winter met treachery in the dirt, and the moon leaned closer to watch. The forest erupted into chaos, snarls and steel and screams tangling beneath the blood-bright moon. I shoved the captives toward the shadow of the northern ridge, heart hammering in rhythm with every clash behind us. Keep low, I hissed, and the river woman, Tessa, she murmured when I freed her bonds, gripped my arm, half guiding me when my knees nearly gave out on the roots. Behind, the Alpha King and Vane were a blur of movement, both too fast, too deliberate to watch for long without losing your breath. Sparks flew each time blade met blade, their strength shaking the air. I'd never seen power like Asher's, calm, devastating, not a snarl wasted. Vane fought like wildfire, beautiful, reckless, a thing that burned everything, even itself. The 7 women stumbled ahead, their shapes flickering between moonlight and shadow. I glanced back once, only once, and saw the king's eyes catch mine across the melee. Silver, bright as a promise. Run, he mouthed, voice drowned by the roar of wolves. I turned and obeyed, forcing my feet to move faster, deeper into the tree line where Thorn's warriors waited in the dark. When the first of them caught sight of us, they surged forward, shields forming a wall between the women and the chaos behind. Get them to the line, Thorn barked. The king stays until Vane falls. I wanted to argue, to go back, but the forest itself seemed to pull me forward, and Sable's distant cry split the sky like thunder. We reached the ridge as the horizon bled pale. Behind us, the sounds of battle softened into something worse, silence, heavy and uncertain. Thorn lifted his head, scenting the air, tension drawn tight through every muscle. He's still standing, he said, almost to himself. I'd know if he wasn't. Relief and fear tangled in my chest. The freed women huddled together, half in shock, half disbelieving they were alive. I found water in my satchel, handed it to Tessa, and tried to make my hands stop shaking. You shouldn't have stayed with him, Thorn said, voice low. I looked up, meeting his gray stare. He told me to run. And you listened, he said. Good. Because if you hadn't, we'd be burying you both. He turned away before I could answer. Moments later, a distant howl rolled through the forest, deep, powerful, claiming. The Frost March wolves answered as one. The battle was done. We waited, hearts half-stilled, until the underbrush stirred and the Alpha King stepped into view, clothes torn, one sleeve dark with blood. His eyes found me first, and some invisible knot inside me uncoiled. He's dead, Asher said simply. Vane's threat ends here. No one cheered. The victory carried too much grief, too many bodies cooling beneath the pines. At dawn, the survivors gathered in the clearing. Fires burned low, the smoke carrying the scent of iron and pine. The rescued women were wrapped in furs, murmuring soft thanks to the healers tending them. I stood apart, the pendant heavy against my chest. Asher moved among his wolves, speaking quietly to each, his authority unspoken yet absolute. When he reached me, the exhaustion in his eyes softened into something gentler. You did more than I asked, he said. You saved them. I shook my head. We all did. His mouth curved faintly. Humility doesn't suit a creature who stood between kings and didn't flinch. A strange warmth spread through me, something dangerously close to pride. What happens now? I asked. He looked to the horizon where the first light painted the mountains gold. No, he said. You choose. Choose? The packs will return south, he explained. The hollow will burn, and the northern territory will remember this night. You can return to the southern pines, or you can come north, to learn what it means to carry both bloods without apology. I stared at him, the offer heavier than any command. If I go north, I asked softly, what will I be? His silver eyes caught the light. Whatever the moon decides, he said. But not invisible. Never that again. That night, under a calmer moon, the council gathered one final time. The air smelled of wet soil and wood smoke, the forest trying to heal itself around the scars of battle. Alphas spoke of treaties, reparations, lines redrawn in the dirt. I listened from the edge of the circle, my mind half elsewhere, on the sound of Sable's low breathing nearby, on the way Asher's shadow stretched long beside mine. When the southern pine's alpha rose, his voice held the practiced calm of a man who'd lost power and meant to keep what remained. The half-blood has proven useful, he said, nodding toward me. Perhaps her talents could serve the packs again, in a controlled way. Asher's head lifted. She's not yours to use. Nor yours to claim, the other shot back. The words cracked the quiet like ice breaking on a river. For a moment, I thought the council would shatter into another war. But Asher didn't bare his teeth. He only looked at me, waiting. The decision wasn't his, it was mine. My voice came steady when I finally spoke. I'm not a tool, I said. And I'm not a secret. I glanced around the firelight, meeting the eyes of each alpha in turn. I've spent my life pretending to be less. I won't anymore. The forest itself seemed to listen. When I looked back to Asher, his expression was unreadable, but proud. At dawn, the northern wolves prepared to depart. Horses stamped mist into the cold air, packs loaded with what little they'd taken from the hollow. The rescued women chose different paths, some returning home, some joining other packs to start anew. I stood at the tree line, heart torn between roots and wings. Eloan approached quietly, her once perfect braids now loose, her eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. You made me look small, she said, but there was no malice in it. Maybe that's good for me. I smiled faintly. You were never small, Eloan. You just didn't need to be cruel to seem tall. She laughed once, brittle but real. You'll go north? I think I have to. She nodded, pressing a small silver pin into my palm. So you remember where you began. We embraced briefly, and when she walked away, I felt the last thread of my old life unwind. Asher was waiting beside Sable, the sunrise gilding his scar. Ready? He asked. I looked once more at the smoldering horizon of the southern pines, the ashes, the ghosts, the girl I had been, and nodded. Yes, I said. Let's go home. The ride north took 3 days. The world changed as we climbed, the air thinner, the pines darker, rivers running colder and faster. At night, we camped beneath skies so full of stars they looked like scattered glass. Asher rarely spoke, but his presence was steady, his silence never uncomfortable. On the second night, when the fire had died low, he handed me a piece of polished obsidian. Your mother carried this, he said. A shard from Silver Lake. It reflects the truth, not the shape. I studied my reflection in the black stone, half light, half shadow. She saw something in you, I said. Before you became king. His eyes lifted to the stars. She saw what I could be, not what I was. I turned the obsidian in my hand, seeing both our faces mirrored in its surface. And what do you see now? I asked quietly. He hesitated. Someone the moon might forgive me for protecting, he said at last. The words sank deep, gentler than I expected, heavier than I was ready for. We reached the northern stronghold at dusk. It rose from the snow like an ancient beast, stone walls veined with frost, torches burning blue in the cold. Wolves bowed their heads as we passed, some curious, some wary. The scent of mountain wind and cedar wrapped around me like a second skin. Inside, the great hall was warm, hung with banners bearing the mark of the frost march, silver on black, the crescent of a moon over a lake. Asher led me to a smaller chamber lit by firelight, and set a goblet of spiced wine in my hands. This was hers, he said softly, gesturing to the carved chair near the hearth. Your mother's. I traced a pattern of half-moons etched into the wood, each one slightly different, imperfect and beautiful. She wasn't afraid of what she was. I murmured. Neither should you be. Asher's tone was firm but kind. Here, you're not half anything. You're both. And both is rare. Outside, the wind howled, but inside, for the first time in my life, I wasn't cold. Weeks passed, and the rhythms of the north became my own. I learned the ways of their wolves, their rituals, their songs, the quiet reverence they gave the moon. My wolf grew stronger, her voice clearer, no longer just an echo behind my ribs. Sometimes, in the training grounds, Asher watched from a distance, his expression unreadable, until I finally shifted beneath the northern sky, silver first streaked with gold, the perfect union of what I had been and what I was becoming. When I returned to human form, trembling and laughing, he was there with a cloak, wrapping it around my shoulders without a word. The hall erupted in cheers, wolves bowing their heads as if the moon herself had descended to bless me. "What now?" I asked him later by the fire. He smiled, rare and soft. "Now, little half-moon, you stop hiding from your own story." I looked out at the snow-reflecting starlight, and for the first time, I believed I could. The north taught me to listen with more than ears. Snow speaks in different silences, the crisp hush of new snowfall, the soft settle of drifts giving, the crack that warns of hidden ice. I learned the cadence of patrol horns and the difference between a wolf's playful yip and a sentry's warning. I learned the weight of a blade on my hip, my mother's crescent-handled knife, now balanced to my hand by a smith who hummed old lake songs while he worked. When I faltered shifting, Elder Mara, gray as frost, eyes like dawn, pressed my shoulders with warm hands. "Half-road," she murmured, using a name that felt like a blessing now. "Your wolf isn't small. She's polite. Invite her." I closed my eyes, breathed pine and cold iron, and asked nicely. My wolf came, silver-streaked with warm gold, quiet-footed and sure, and the courtyard howled their approval under a thin, laughing moon. Asher watched from the wall, arms folded, unreadable. Later, he traded the wall for the training circle. "Again," he said, wooden staff in hand. "Your human reads angles. Your wolf reads breath. Use both." We moved. He never struck to bruise, he struck to wake. When my staff clacked against his with a clean, ringing sound, pride flickered across his face before he smothered it like an ember. "Better," he said. "Good." I shot back, out of breath but grinning. "Say good. His mouth twitched. "Good," he allowed, as if rewarding a stubborn season for turning. Winter courts came like migrating stars, envoys from mountain packs, river packs, and the tiny snowbound clans that answered to no banner but the moon. Some regarded me with curiosity, others with calculation. The word hybrid rode the air like smoke, some sweet, some bitter. In council, Asher said little until it mattered, then everyone listened because the room understood consequence. "The hollow is ash," reported Thorn, laying a charcoal-sketched map on the table. "But ash remembers seeds." He pointed to the dark gullies that fed the valley. "Vane's lieutenants scattered into these ravines. They'll gather if we let them." The river matriarch's envoy, a woman wearing a necklace of river glass and scars, nodded. "We have heard whistles on fog nights." My mouth moved before permission. Whistles with 3 notes? Low, higher, low? Heads turned. I had heard them on the southern borders in childhood and thought they were birds with secrets. "Recruitment," Thorn confirmed. Asher's gaze flicked to mine, the barest ghost of approval. "We break the chain," he said. Quietly. "We take their voice before they find a new throat." Later, in the smaller chamber by the hearth, I traced the map alone. Asher's shadow fell beside mine. "You hear what others miss," he said. "Not a trick," I answered. "Just 2 kinds of listening." "Both," he said, and his voice did that softer thing it saved for certain truths. "Never less. The Frost March kept an old rite for naming what you are willing to defend. Not a battle trial, those are noisy and empty, but a moon-quieted one called the Vigil. A circle of stones, a single torch, a question spoken to whoever dared answer." Elder Mara pressed a bare palm to my cheek. "You can refuse," she said, though her smile told me she hoped I wouldn't. Refusing is a kind of answer, I said. But not mine. Night fell bright on snow. Wolves ringed the circle in human and in fur. The torch guttered and steadied. Thorn spoke first, voice low and even. Name what you will stand for when standing costs you. The wind tried to answer. The pines tried. My heart answered instead. For bridges, I said, throat tight. For those who don't fit the boxes the elders love. For the omegas who learn to make themselves smaller, and the alphas who forgot that power can kneel. I didn't mean to look at Asher, but there we were, breath fogging the same thin air. For the captives who returned, I finished, and the ones we didn't find. For both. Silence held like cupped hands. Then the wolves bowed their heads, not to me, I think, but to the shape the words made in the cold. After, as we walked the corridor lit by blue torches, Asher said quietly, The moon heard you. Did you? I asked, not teasing. He didn't smile. I did, he said. And I won't forget. The first crackback came at dawn 2 weeks later, swift as ice snap on a spring river. A scout staggered in with frost in his eyebrows and blood freezing on his sleeve. Whistles in the blind ravine, he gasped. 3 notes. A fourth answered. Asher moved like a decision, not a man. Seal the east gate, he ordered. No torches in the ravine, let your ears be your light. He looked to me. You're with me. Thorn didn't argue. Sable's breath plumed white as we descended into a place that seemed to have forgotten light. The ravine was a throat, narrow, slick, echoing. We walked, not rode, boots low, blades quiet. The first whistle came thin and sly. Low. Higher. Low. An answer skated back at us from the dark. Higher. Low. Higher. It sounded wrong if you knew old songs. They're mimicking, I breathed. They don't know the river packs changed the pattern after the fires. Which means they're outsiders, Asher said. Or desperate. The third signal floated down. I lifted a hand, feeling the shape of the sound slide along the stone. Left pocket, I whispered, and when we rounded the bend we saw them, 3 wolves in human form and 1 boy too young to have a wolf at all, eyes wide, lips split, desperate for a pack-shaped place to belong. Desperation breeds armies if you let it. Lay down steel, Asher said, voice not unkind. Keep your hands. The oldest moved wrong. He was going to die for the wrong man's dream and take the boy with him. I stepped forward. Don't, I said, and let the word carry every time someone bigger had told me to shrink. It hit like a bell. He froze. The boy burst into tears he'd been choking for years. We took them without blood. Not victory, mercy. Sometimes that's harder. Mercy ripples. The rescued boy, Finn, all elbows and moon-hungry eyes, shadowed me after that like a smaller, noisier wolf. Elder Mara put him to work grinding herbs and cleaning kettles. Thorn taught him to swear accurately. Sable allowed exactly 1 nose stroke before flipping his mane like he'd been gravely insulted. Nights, Finn dozed by the hearth while the grown world argued softly. Vane's lieutenants will try again, the river envoy warned. They'll promise what lonely boys want to hear. Asher's stare remained on the fire. Then we promise louder, and keep it. He stood, restless. Clara, walk with me. The courtyard held the clean bite of late winter. Stars burned like the points of a crown. You spoke in the vigil of alphas who kneel, he said at last. I know the kind of king my father was. I have spent half my life unlearning him. His breath fogged, vanished. The other half, I have learned you. Heat rose to my face and had nothing to do with the brazier. You don't need me to be a better king, I said. I want you anyway. Slipped out before thought could catch it. The truth hung there between us, bright and bare as snow and moonlight, frightening because it did not apologize. His eyes closed for a heartbeat like a man struck by beauty or a blade. If I claim you, he said, voice roughened, it can't be as a trophy the courts expect. It must be as the woman who tells me when to put my sword away. He looked at me, not away. And I must be the man who listens. My wolf lifted her head. My human lifted her chin. Then listen, I said. We don't denounce. We build. We show Omegas a road to power that isn't stolen from someone else. We show Alphas that strength is a verb you do for others. He exhaled a laugh more relief than humor. Good, he said, and did not touch me. The not touch meant more than a kiss. Spring pried winter's fingers loose one by one. Snowmelt chattered down from Silver Lake, the training yard turned to mud, and joy smelled like wet earth and fur. We rewrote small laws first. Healers could be Omega or Alpha without losing standing. Patrol captains rotated by merit instead of pedigree. Disputes heard by 3, 1 Alpha, 1 Omega, 1 Elder, so the verdict wore balance. Courtiers grumbled, then adjusted. Wolves who'd learned to shrink stood taller. I found a rhythm teaching with Elder Mera: breathe before bite, kindness before strength, both when possible, bite when necessary. And because the world never allows too much peace, trouble wrote to us in a hand of ash. A courier arrived from the southern pines with a message sealed in green wax. Beta Halvin's signet. Honored King Asher. Thorn read aloud, mouth curling at honored. The half-blood Clara is demanded to answer for abandonment of duty, theft of southern property, and incitement of discord among allied packs. My laugh had more teeth than sense. I didn't know I counted as property, I said, voice flat. Asher held out his hand for the letter. He read every word like he was measuring it to Barry. When he finished, he folded the paper once, twice, again, until it was small enough to tuck under a thumb. The South mistakes courtesy for permission, he said. We'll answer. Not with war. With witness. He looked at me. Will you stand in their hall and tell the truth about what they made you and what you chose? Fear stirred, old habits, old rooms, but fear had learned new manners. Yes, I said. I'll stand. Good, he murmured. Then, for the first time, he drew a line with his palm along my jaw, slow as a vow. And I'll stand beside you. My pulse answered in 2 languages, wolf and woman, both saying the same word. The southern pines hall looked smaller than I remembered, its gold-trimmed doors dull with dust, its marble floors echoing like hollow promises. I stood beside Asher, my boots marking the same stone where I once carried trays in silence. Beta Halvin sat in his high-backed chair, the weight of his arrogance sagging heavier than any crown. You return with an army behind you, he said. Do you mean to shame us? I don't need an army to shame you, I answered, calm but steady. You did that when you called your own kind property. Murmurs rippled through the gathered packs. Eloin stepped forward, her chin high, voice cutting clean through the room. She's right, father. That was the blow he didn't expect. His jaw twitched, but she didn't falter. You threw her away because she was different. The North called that strength. Asher placed a hand on the hilt of his sword, not in threat, but in quiet authority. This is no conquest, he said. This is correction. The Frost March recognizes Clara of both bloods as Luna of the Northern Court. The title rolled across the room like thunder finding its valley. My breath caught, my heart refusing to believe the words had shape until I saw the way the moonlight, real, soft, forgiving, broke through the high windows to rest against me. I didn't bow. I didn't need to. Halvin said nothing. The silence he'd once used to shrink me now belonged to me instead. I turned toward Asher, every fear I'd ever carried folding itself into something lighter. Half-road, he whispered, only for me. You built the bridge. Later, when the council dismissed and the torches burned low, I stood outside beneath the moon that had watched every version of me. The wind carried both pine and frost, 2 worlds braided like one breath. Asher came to stand beside me. Either of us spoke. We didn't need to. The war was done. The wolves were free. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't caught between halves, I was whole.